Not my story, but my dad's. He was traveling through Arizona on his way to Mexico. He looked to the side of the road and saw a man hitchhiking. My dad pulled over and asked where the guy is going, to which the man said the next town over. My dad, being a very trusting man, and this being the 70s or 80s, decided he would give him a ride. While they are driving, they start talking, and my father asked for his name. His name was Doe. My dad, quite shocked, looked at him and replied, "Holy crap, that's my name." They had a few small conversations, and at the next town, my dad let him out and continued to Mexico. He eventually reached the border. He pulled up, and the border official asked to see his license. He took a good long look at the license. The official then took off his big aviator glasses and told him to pull over to the side. My dad got out of the car and they put him in a room while they searched his car. He was sitting in the room for a few hours, admiring the entire wall of the confiscated tequila when the officer walked back in and apologized for the wait. My dad asked what the reason was, and the officer replied, "There is a warrant out for the arrest of Doe." Once again dazed, my dad asked, "What for?" The officer replied, "Murder." My dad nearly crapped his pants. I was driving through rural New Jersey when I saw him, a hitchhiker standing by the side of the road. Surprisingly well dressed, black suit, silky black hair, narrow briefcase. Now I know I shouldn't pick up hitchhikers, but I'm 6'4", 230 pounds, with all kinds of hunting equipment in the back of my trunk. It's not like this prissy ass businessman is going to beat me to death and leave me on the side of the road. Besides, I need gas money. "Hey man," I said, pulling over to the side of the road. "I'll give you a lift if you pay me for gas." "Of course," he said in a polite, almost British accent. He reached for his wallet and pulled out three crisp $20 bills. "This enough?" I grinned. "That's way more than enough." I greedily snatched the money from him and clicked the locks. "Get in, bud." He climbed in. His blue eyes shifted from the crumpled Wendy's wrapper on the dashboard to the mysterious sticky goo on the middle console. "Sorry, the car's not clean. I'm going hunting," I said, turning back onto the highway. "Hunting? Interesting," he said in a strangely enthusiastic tone. "Have you always liked to hunt?" "No, it's the funniest thing. Never thought I'd ever hunt. Love animals. Got three dogs at home. But there are so many deer around these parts, and the winter comes, a lot of them starve to death. Not to mention all the car accidents they cause." I trailed off, and we fell into uncomfortable silence. "Just hunting for the day then?" "No, my buddy Matt and I will be out for the whole weekend." He let out a laugh. "The whole weekend? Your wife's a saint for letting you go." "My wife? How did he?" But then my eyes fell on the steering wheel and the silver ring on my finger. "Ah, yeah. Mary's a doll. She's actually pregnant, 5 months with a little girl." He gave me a crooked smile. "A girl, huh?" "Yeah." I could feel him staring at me long after we had fallen into silence. It made me uncomfortable. I clicked on the radio. "How did you meet Matt?" he asked, fiddling with the dial. All that came through was static. That's a weird question, I thought. He and Mary were close friends, so when we got married, I got to know him well. "Mm-hmm," the man said, stroking his chin thoughtfully, and I was suddenly reminded of a psychiatrist. "Are you a psychiatrist?" I blurted out. He laughed. "Definitely not. I work in finance." "What type of finance?" It was my turn to ask the questions now. "Futures," he replied. I glanced over at him. A small smile was on his lips, and I noticed his fingers had gravitated from his lap to the briefcase at his feet. My heart began to pound. Click, click. He undid the clasps. The case creaked open. "What's in your briefcase?" I asked. "Work." "What kind of?" His long fingers disappeared into the darkness of the case. He was pulling something out. My bodies began to seize up. The steering wheel felt like ice under my fingers. "I have a lot of hunting equipment back there," I said, "so you better not be." I stopped. He was only pulling out a sheet of paper. For a few minutes he was quiet, reading the paper intently and silently, as if his life depended on it. Then he slipped it back into the case and snapped it shut. What was he reading? I thought, but before I could get question out, he turned towards me. I could barely see his face in my peripheral vision, but I knew he was staring at me. For a few minutes on it. Then he broke the silence. "Don't go hunting," he said. His blue eyes boring into me. "What?" "Turn the car around. Go home to Mary." "What?" "She needs you." He paused. "Madeline needs you." I paled. Never told him we were going to name our baby Madeline. How did you? He's going to make it look like an accident, he said, his voice gravely and halting. Just a simple hunting accident. The most punishment he'll endure is 35 minutes in the police station writing out a statement. But let me off that diner up ahead. I like the Cobb salad very much. Matt's going to kill me? What are you talking about? He turned to me, eyes wide. What are you talking about? About what you just said. All I said is, I'd like you to let me off at the diner, please. He pointed to the exit curving off the highway. You're going to miss it if you don't slow down. With a shaking hand, I clicked on my blinker, pulled off the exit into the parking lot. My heart pounded in time with the click click clicks of the cooling engine. Thank you for the ride, he said, pulling his briefcase out with him. Have a good drive, will you? I couldn't sneak out a reply before the door slammed shut. I didn't believe him, but my nerves were too short to continue the trip either. I texted Matt that I was sick, turned around, and went home to Mary. Mary was thrilled. Matt was disappointed. A little too disappointed, if you ask me. A month later, after ignoring most of Matt's calls and texts, which became increasingly frequent and desperate, I heard a faint thumping noise at the door. When I flicked on the porch light, there was Matt, hunched over our doorknob, holding a lockpick. We called the police. Since then, life has been great. Just a few months later, a wonderful little Madeline was born. And as soon as we got back from the hospital, on our doorstep was a little teddy bear, a pink bow sewed on his head. There wasn't a return address or a card of any kind, but I think I know who it's from. So, this was once told to me by an old family friend, Nikki, numerous times as a kid growing up, as one of those life advice stories to keep in mind through the years. And to her credit, I've never forgotten it. Whenever anything associated with hitchhiking comes up, it always springs to my mind and probably always will. Makes me a bit ill whenever I think about it actually. So, Nikki, who grew up at the same time as my dad, around the early 80s, was a young woman in her mid 20s. She's one of those real kind hearted souls, always willing to help another out in the time of need. And I can't imagine her being anything other than that she was when younger, so I totally see her doing this too. So, driving into the city, she saw a man walking down the side of the road. As she neared, he turned and, in a typical hitchhiker manner, stuck out the old arm and thumb. Nikki, bless her heart, pulled over and asked him if he needed any help. She told me that he was really polite, if not a bit shy, when asked for a lift into the city. Nikki gave a smile and popped out the passenger door for the guy, who tossed his bag into the back seat and buckled up for the ride ahead. They talked pleasantly for most of the trip about friends, the news, etc. She felt that they were getting on really well and even bought him dinner at the pit shop a little over halfway there. She says he seemed really flustered and awkward when she paid, but one of the things they had talked about was money and how he was pretty dang strapped for the cash, which was why he was hitchhiking in the first place. But he eventually relented and they went on their way. As soon as they got into the city, he thanked her profusely for the ride and the food and asked to be dropped off once they hit downtown. Before getting out, he asked for Nikki's phone number so that he could contact her someday and catch up. Thrilled at the prospect of knowing how her new friend was faring, Nikki wrote it down for him and drove off with a warm feeling of good deed done. Now, I'm sorry if you were expecting something creepy to have happened by now, but I think this is what freaked me out so much as a kid. How nice everything seemed to have worked out. Nikki would get this crease in her forehead and a funny look in her eye when she would tell me the next part. A week later, she got a phone call from a driving buddy. He didn't let her get a word in edgewise after hello and told her that she should thank God that she was raised so nice because when he first got in the car, he was planning on raping and murdering her once they got to that pit stop. That he was going to steal that car and dump her body in a ditch further down the road and go on his merry way. But after she talked with him so kindly and treated him to dinner with a smile on her face, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He didn't think that he could live with himself after doing that to such a nice lady. And to please, please, Nikki, please, never ever pick up another hitchhiker. Then he hung up the phone. Nikki never got a call from him again. When she tried redialing the number, she got a payphone. And so, Mr. Hitchhiker, I know I'm never going to meet you because I'm going to listen to the advice you gave your driving buddy and never, ever pick up a hitchhiker.